start. So my name is Jacqueline Massey, and I'm Executive Director of the Arts Council. And we're really so excited that we have a public art policy now, and that this committee has been formed. It's been a mandate of the Arts Council for a long time to have a policy, and we really enjoy working with the municipality to get it to that place where it can be accepted by council. Just a little bit about the way it came about was that we looked at a lot of different communities. We certainly didn't start from scratch. We looked at some similar sized communities, what kind of policies they had in place, did quite a bit of research, and then kind of created the framework for it, and then applied it to our local situation. So yeah, we're just really happy that this is important.
Cool. I've always been a huge fan and supporter of public art, and when I moved to Bowen 5 years ago, I was just shocked at the lack of public art here, and just really want to make it happen. And I was a visual art and visual effects industry for 30 years, so I'm an artist, but I'm also sort of technical, and now I'm a realtor. Anyway, totally involved in Bowen. I'm on the visual arts committee, and really excited to be part of this.
I'm Maureen Nicholson. I'm the council liaison for this committee. My day job is I'm the chair of the communications department at Douglas College, and I study textile art as an undergraduate. I'm glad to be here. It took a little while to get the policy through, but yeah, looking forward to it.
Scott Massey. I've been on board about 4 years now. I've been involved professionally in many capacities in art for about 20 years now. Graduate at Emily Carr, and same. I as Marilyn, I think I'm very interested not only in art, obviously, but public art. Specifically, I do work with the City of Vancouver. I think probably that got passed around, or you may know that. City of Vancouver Public Art Department, I've been involved with them from a maintenance standpoint for about 15 years on and off as an independent contractor, now working with them as a permanent part-time position overseeing maintenance. So I've got a huge amount of experience about that and all of the pitfalls that can easily occur in terms of seeing public art projects at all stages. I've been involved in public art in all stages, from being an artist on the side of the table proposing works, to being on juries reviewing works, to the municipal side of it, trying to figure out how to get all those things implemented and put in successfully. Yeah, and I'm very excited that Bowen, that all this work's been done, and that Bowen's actually looking at starting seriously with the public art program. It's pretty fantastic.
Great to have you on board.
I'm Rita. I'm on the board of the Arts Council, and I'm chair of the Visual Arts Committee. And I've lived on Bowen a lot of years, like 27. And really looking forward to being involved in getting some public art up and started and get us away to the races.
Great. I'm Shauna. I'm the manager of recreation and community services for the municipality, and I'm the staff liaison. I am very happy to be surrounded by all of you people who know about art. I'll just say that. I have a keen interest in public space, though, and how public spaces can be a part in building community, and appreciate that public art is a huge part of that, creating that public space where people want to be, and then people gather, and then people have that sense of community, or even just some interaction with people they may not already know, or they may not meet otherwise. So yeah, I'm excited to be here, and definitely will appreciate some of the public art projects that I'm sure we can bring forward, and yeah, that's me.
I'm the committee clerk. I'm like Shauna, just looking forward to being all your artistic ideas and record them for public record.
Thanks, everyone, that's great. Hopefully everybody's had a chance to look at our agenda today, and I'm wondering if there's any late items that need to be added to the agenda? Okay, if not, then do we have to approve the agenda? We do, okay. Okay, seconder. Thanks. Support. So, we don't have anyone here to make any public comments, so skip by that part. And so we will move on to our election. So the really important part of getting things underway, we need to elect a chair and a vice chair, or could be a, vice chair. So hopefully you guys have had a chance also to just kind of read over the terms of reference for the committee itself. Open up the nominations for chair. And of course you can self-nominate yourself.
Okay.
I would like to nominate Scott.
I'm second that.
I'll third it.
That's fast.
I should ask if express if anybody's interested in standing for this position. I am considering nominating you based on your experience and background. It sounds like you're going to bring a lot of expertise and knowledge into this group, and probably, and without knowing further information, but probably you hold the most experience in this area. So I'm wondering if you would accept that nomination.
Happily, absolutely, yeah, sure,
That's
okay.
great. Okay.
Thank you.
All in favor? Thank you.
All right.
And a vice chair. Pressure's on now.
So, yeah, suddenly got so important, hang on.
So you can continue to chair if you'd like, or we can just go first finish up the elections for vice chair, if anybody would like to stand in that role.
I nominate Mary Lynn.
I second that.
I third. That's good.
And how do you feel about that?
I will accept.
Oh, wonderful. All right. Support. Mary Lynn, Victor, I know, this is
Great,
really good.
things move fast, yeah.
Great, thank you.
Okay, yes.
Yeah, we're on a
Yeah,
roll
for
for
elections.
elections. So, Scott, I'm going to turn the meeting over to you if you want, if that's okay.
Sure, yeah.
You're not prepared, that's fine, but yeah, it doesn't matter, because you have to do it anyway.
It's been a long time since I chaired any meetings. In fact, probably like since my days on co-op housing board. So I would be rusty at best with it. But so essentially, we could just go through.
Yeah, we kind of prepared the agenda in preparation, but yeah.
We can talk later after the meeting if you want as well.
Yeah, you know what? Maybe do you mind? Do you want to carry on? You've got a lot more experience in this regard than I do, and you're already flowing. So, and then I will get sort of like back into the groove of that role.
That's fine, and I believe the municipality has a great guideline for chairs and vice chairs, right? And how to conduct the business. So
Okay, step up
that
and
will
probably
be
get that for.
ideal
Sort that out.
information for that.
All right,
Yeah,
let's
that's
go.
great.
Let's go that way.
Okay, well, thank you both.
But you guys have to promise to tell Philip that he was elected chair.
That's right. I'll let him know right away.
That's some new things around.
So I guess the next order is the schedule. So we want to determine when.
So this, you don't have to set a schedule, it just smoother, if you can get an idea of what it's gonna be like, so we don't have to reinvent the wheel every time. If there's some regularity or some availability you'd like to get for the record.
Right. And at this point, I'm not sure we know how often we would be meeting. Perhaps that will come out of our discussion further on about some priorities.
Do you want to put that at the end, Mike?
Any input on that?
About frequency?
Frequency and when we would be meeting.
Right,
So we want
right.
to stay specific to a day. I guess it was kind of interesting that all members agreed to meet during the day for this committee, which is, not unusual, but some are not able to. So maybe we can just determine if that's the ideal time for us. Is it?
Maybe we should just check with Phil and see, does he commute every day?
He's got a fairly he's usually in town
Yeah.
during the week, although his schedule can be often flexible. I think the one thing I know is that they're in the middle of a pretty major install at the Vancouver Art Gallery right now, and I think he probably just couldn't get away. But yeah, I think we could check with him to see if in future middays might be more amenable than now, but
Here, I've got it all here.
Yeah.
This book has been done, this is gonna be painful for the eyes, especially for the artists. It's not very pretty, but the information's there.
Hey, we all use Word, it's okay.
Yeah, step this down, this prep work.
It's coming.
And just in terms of frequency, I know Jackie, Maureen, and I had met and talked about maybe meeting kind of once a month for the first few months until we have a work plan established and decide what those priorities would be for the group, and then maybe it does spread out a little bit more once every 3 months or 4 months as needed, or as there's a project or something like that. So just throw that on the table
Yeah.
to see what people think about that.
that if that flexibility is like, or the frequency is variable to some degree. I know if we are in the middle of like maybe launching one of the projects, probably we'd be meeting a little bit more often.
Yeah, yeah.
Let's see, look for evening. So yeah, I've got Tuesdays here. I think, so Mary Lynn was Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and then Scott was Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. Philip was weekdays sometimes,
But
not often.
Maureen, do you have any preference?
My availability changes every 4 months, so at the moment I can't do Wednesdays. Fridays are usually full of other committee meetings, and Mondays are council. So Tuesdays, Thursdays sounds like at the moment the best.
And could we use something like a to alternate between a daytime and then an evening time?
Might
Ooh.
Yeah.
it's gonna be
be the best idea, yeah.
And this sounds like Tuesday is the best date.
Not for evenings.
No.
People love Tuesday evenings. So we've got Parks and Trails, Transportation Advisory Committee, what else?
I think Heritage met on a Tuesday the last
Yeah.
time.
Could we meet somewhere else, or do we have to meet here?
It's more about staff.
It's more about here, but you also need staff. So that would mean I have to find
Can't
some
have
to
staff.
cover.
Oh, we could have staff, we could have somewhere else. You only come with this.
There are other steps,
No,
but
we
they're
want
not
to.
used to working.
Okay.
It would be because Steph would be in those other meetings.
Got it.
As
That's
well,
right,
in
they're all
addition.
your time. These are all planned, right.
There are, I mean,
Okay.
Maybe
So what
we
about-
should check with Philip and see when he says some weekdays, is that supposed to be not often?
sorry, I told you it's nasty. It was really correct. This is not often, and then that's.
Oh, okay.
So it was so what was the other day, Tuesday, Thursdays, Wednesday, what's a blackout day?
Can't do it.
I can't tie that day.
Is that you?
So not a Wednesday?
Yeah,
Yes.
typically Wednesday is my in-office day at the city of Vancouver.
Okay, fair enough.
But that, again, that can be flexible. It's just that right now it's working out really well that that's the day that I go in, because we all do meetings at the same time.
What about Tuesday 5 to 7?
Okay.
Or does that get
Oh,
too
no,
far?
Tuesday you said no.
No, that'll work. That's fine.
Oh, because it's
Oh, I
before
don't,
the
I don't
meeting.
want to do it
It'll
over the
be-
dinner hour.
You'll have a meeting at 7, right?
It's totally fine. It just means that my kids have to put up with their father for dinner instead of me. That's fine.
But you
No,
also,
seriously, Steph, is it
It's
okay?
fine. It's fine. Yeah.
what about
Perfect.
4:30 to 6:30, so at least you get
Nope.
to eat?
No, 5 to 7 is perfect.
I don't want 5 to 7.
Oh,
No, it's my life's too complicated to be away at that
Right.
particular
Fair
time
fair
of day.
enough, fair enough, yeah.
okay.
Okay.
I know I'm making your life difficult.
No, that's fine.
It's always hard to
We
get.
do,
Yeah.
we do this with every committee.
Yeah, don't worry.
Don't worry.
So what about a Thursday, 7 o'clock, and a Tuesday, 1 o'clock and a Thursday, 7 o'clock?
Do you want to make that as a first proposal? And
Okay.
see how everybody sits with that upon reflection? And then we'll
Okay.
get a little bit more input, maybe from Phil.
Sharon already.
No, well,
Excellent
Okay.
choice. Sounds great.
So Tuesdays at 1 p.m. and Thursdays, did we say 7 o'clock? Yeah, there will be a couple of Thursdays available. And then maybe I'll come up with a doodle poll based on that. Okay. So I'll make this an action item. Okay.
And then maybe should we inform the doodle poll with, like, what do people think about the once a month for the next few meetings, and then space them out a little bit more? Just
That makes sense to me.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Get our wheels on this.
At 7 p.m. and once a month.
for the next 3.
Let's say at least 3, I think, yeah, let's do that.
Ish. Okay.
Thank you.
Nice, thank you.
Okay, so our first is to just do a bit of an overview of the policy, the public programming policy, and again, hopefully everybody's had a chance to take a look at it, but just so that we all kind of recognize or look at it together, become familiar with it. We need to go through it line by line, but certainly the intent, I think, is very clear and obvious in terms of what we're trying to achieve. And as far as the definitions of public art go, I think it's incorporated quite a broad definition, and of course it includes both temporary, longer term as well, and encompasses things like land art as well. And of course the statement, Shauna, thanks for your comments when we doing the introductions about creating these public spaces, so very important. To me, that's primary as far as ensuring that there's a reflection of our community as an artistic community. It's a draw for tourism, of course, but it's also just creating public spaces for our own community and appreciation of the environment, both built and natural. So, I'm just going through if anybody has any questions on anything about the purpose, goals, and objectives, how things were defined. There were some questions went back and forth over these definitions, but they're pretty standard in terms of, again, just pulling in what other policies have as examples. In terms of the context, so looking at our own OCP, we just pulled out a couple of references that were relevant. Certainly, public art is in the cultural master plan, quite embedded in terms of that. The art organization itself has done a little bit of fundraising for public art, with some success. We've also done a few things, some exercises more than anything else around land art, because there seems to be quite a bit of interest from our community in land art, but we haven't really pursued it to much extent. And then the Bone Island Parks Plan, I don't know, there's just on the one reference, but certainly potential to incorporate public art within the Parks Plan. We also reference the integrated transportation plan. And then this clause was added about partnering with municipal departments, which of course comes up from time to time. Community services, I guess it was more of a committee, the one that was, Stud Cove Improvement Committee, is that the one that undertook the sidewalk public arts
Yes.
project? Yeah, a
She
few years ago.
agrees.
Yeah, so that was.
Sidewalks.
Sidewalk.
Oh, yes. More sidewalks.
Just going into part 3 in terms of short, medium-term priorities. So we've already completed the first one, establishing a public art advisory committee. So these next ones are, could encompass quite a lot of work, and we need to eventually identify priorities in terms of what we're going to tackle, but best practices in the management of public art program. again, these might be policies that develop, public art inventory. So there's been some work started on that, and even though we talk about creating a public art, there's actually is quite a number of pieces of public art within our community, both on private and public lands. And we did one about probably 7 years ago, so it's definitely dated, but we do have a list that has begun, so we need to add and complete that list. Community-driven art projects, and I think that those would be ones that would come to us, right, referred to us, or the community would come to us and talk to us about those. And then, which is similarly to community partnerships and donations and private contributions. And actually later on, when we start talking about things, I have a private donation that I would like to bring forward to the committee. I've been asked to bring forward to the committee. Acquisition, again, so it's defining it there, but also we need policies around acquisition. We need to develop all of that work. Hasn't been done yet. Public art sites, just identifying where this work may go. It's a simple statement on donations, but again, we would need a full policy on how those would be accepted, and in terms of agreements, signing agreements with the donors, things like that, decommissioning eventually. Again, the inventory, I already mentioned that. We need to work on that. Community art projects, so again, this is going into identifying what we were considering. The outreach, so communications a little bit around what we're doing in public art will be important. I brought some examples here of some other communities. Just one is a public art map for North Vancouver, and so they publish this just to explain what they have. And so once we have our inventory and once we have some public art to show off, we could consider doing something like this. And this is Whistler's art guide. You guys can look at those if you want. Funding, right? So we have an annual operating budget this time of $2,500, and I believe there is a $10,000 budget that was established as well for public art.
Yes, and I confirmed that with Raj, the CFO. The annual operating budget of $2,500, where does that rest? Do you know, Shauna?
I don't know.
I thought there was going to be a public art policy fund.
But it would be within a department, so is that something you could check
I think
on?
it would be, yes, yeah,
Okay.
I can check on that.
So, can I just ask, the annual operating budget of $2,500 is really minimal, so what all is it going to cover?
That's for administration and ongoing maintenance of public art, so it's the $10,000. The municipality had allocated an annual contribution of $10,000 to a public art reserve, which would be used to acquire public art.
Right, but for a whole year, $2,500 doesn't seem like very much for maintenance and.
It may not be. I mean, we
And
would
we
have
would
to
have-
define that, right, and then maybe submit a budget in the future.
Okay.
But it will cover some of the meeting costs, or if we were advertising for a public art competition or something like that, so it would go to those operating costs of the committee.
It may also need to be that there's, if somebody's donating a piece of public art, there may need to be some funds donated as well for the maintenance of that. I don't know what best practices are. in
Yeah,
other
typically,
places, but-
I mean, I really only speaking up from private donations, because it's fairly rare, but corporate or developer donations, the way we handle it with the city is that those get taken on, but there's definitely an ask, a requirement for a certain level of funding for about 10 years of proposed maintenance on any project. So I think, the challenge I think we would have here is that the City of Vancouver public art situation is a very different beast than what we would be dealing with, and the developers are required to spend money on that segment, whereas here I don't think obviously that's the case. So we're going to be sort of like on our own in terms of trying to figure out ways of bringing those amounts up, and Greta, you're absolutely right, that is a nearly minuscule amount for what we would need if, say 5 years or 10 years from now, when there's once you start developing a roster of public art, all of those expenses and everything increase substantially, but at least it gives us a start for sure. But we could look at some tools, ways of doing that. But back to the donation situation, we would really, it would be in our best interest, absolutely, before anyone agreed to accept anything, to have a discussion about maintenance funding, and also an assessment, like initial assessment as to does it need anything, right out of the gate sort of thing. So.
Yeah, and I would guess that those things would get addressed in an agreement and policy, because how long will we agree to, for it to be out there, exactly who's paying for what. So a lot of those details would have to be fleshed out in agreement and or a policy.
I think grant
the other thing
proposals would also be another source of income.
Yeah.
And I don't know if there are grants out there that are for maintenance specifically, that they may be into the public art reserve to be able to purchase or acquire.
Just two points. One is that our CFO is coordinating an asset management program right now, so it would be very much top of mind for him if any public art were to come on stream. What's the life cycle cost of this art going to be to the municipality? And the second point is that the majority of our committees don't have any operating budget. So the fact that we've got 2,500 means we're second on the list. I think the only other one at this point that has an operating budget is the Community Economic Development Committee. So this is actually, even though it's a very small amount, it's actually a significant sign of support for communities.
Okay.
Brilliant, good to know.
That's good.
Fantastic.
The other thing I'm wondering in terms of a potential cost are legal fees, which I don't know if we contemplated too much, but if we need to have a legal consideration for an agreement or contract rate with, again, this would be for donations, but so that would have to, or else you put that, I guess, in the project budget when you're acquiring the item. But anyway, that's something you might have to
We
consider.
have a lawyer.
To a lawyer, but there will be fees.
But those are things, we might be able to develop fairly standardized contracts for things. So in a spot, in a donation situation or in a procurement situation, it would sort of roughly be the same sort of information and details that you're trying to address. So maybe it's a cost that we might incur on the front end that we could just wouldn't keep repeating.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So there's a statement regarding copyright and insurance, and then of course going into maintenance. In terms of identifying responsibility and reference to de-accessing as well. So it's short, which was the intention. So I think that although the bones are all there, there's still a lot of work to kind of flesh out a lot of details around each of those items.
We have the wrong mayor then.
We had the wrong, it was the right mayor at the time. So any questions on that policy or any thoughts on it?
Pretty comprehensive for the beginning stage. Yeah, this is great.
And then we just turn to our own terms of reference and that we will follow, which I think are generally standard terms for committees of the municipality. Quite a long list of work there that we will do, responsible for. And I think we have to report annually to council, don't we?
Yeah.
And we recommend a budget. So we can both initiate public art competitions and then also listen to or accept or consider community proposals. It's great. The public art inventory, is actually a deliverable, so I'm going to highlight that as kind of a priority. If everything else on that list pops out. That kind of lays out our work. And then just going into our membership, which I think we've all covered off with Jacqueline here. We have terms of 2 years. Supposed to attend our meetings regularly. And our quorum is majority. Okay. And I think the rest is pretty much straightforward. Unless there's any questions on that, we'll go to the fun part of our afternoon, which is to talk about interests and priorities. We will need to develop a work plan. I think that, or at least I would recommend that. It's, the communities I've been with in the past, it's a great way to keep everyone focused and identified on priorities or timelines and things like that, deadlines. And also I think that within the committee situation, we can create subcommittees. So if there's different people, if people are working in different facets, you could jump onto a subcommittee. So, but on the other hand, we're a pretty small committee anyway, so we might all want to work on these different initiatives. So just to get what we decide to do.
I'm just playing along.
Yeah, so thank you, Steph. You put together some slides or some public art out and about these were the
So
I'm
cute.
sure those look familiar to Maureen. I took them when we were over at the Nanaimo
Yeah.
conference.
Want to see it again? It's a really quick slideshow.
Sure.
Um,
I kind of think of that as land art. What is that?
What is it made out of?
What's in that park? Right by us on the waterfront there.
And is it made out of, like?
Yeah, no, it's like a, like organic material.
Sorry, I know the dog's gonna bark if I shut the door.
Well, can you bring him in?
Yeah, bring it on in. He's afraid of the floor.
But let me stay in his basket.
There's happy sounds of dogs being welcomed everywhere.
Oh, look at that. And that was a community art project, which was kind of interesting. So they had somebody, they commissioned an artist to do it and set up the forum for it, and then people could it's interactive, help put it together. And then it'll eventually fall apart.
It'll fall apart.
Yeah.
They'll just let it
They
fall
won't,
apart.
yeah, they'll take it away.
And what is it called?
You know, I just said community art project on it. It didn't actually have a name. Isn't that weird?
We could name it.
And if the next picture shows it, it's kind of a pretty little,
It looks like something like this.
Oh,
Did you want to see the other
your
version?
stairs? No, I want to see your stairs.
Oh, the stairs, that's a different one.
I love the stories.
We have no stairs over one, but
You went stair crazy.
it was so much fun last day.
Yeah,
Is this all Vancouver?
No,
No. Oh,
it's all over the world.
All over the world.
Looks like San Francisco.
Stairs are so cool.
Organic.
Oh, wow. Yeah. It's on the paper.
Big
Yeah,
bird.
I didn't notice it, yeah. Let me see. Yeesh.
Those are real potted plants.
Oh, yeah.
So just from a recreation standpoint, they've been doing some studies with active transportation and getting people moving. And if there's an escalator beside one of those sets of stairs that has paintings on it or some kind of public art, people are like 85% more likely to choose the stairs than the escalator, just because it's more fun to walk up it.
Okay.
So, yeah, that's kind of my bent on that that piece. But in terms of getting people walking upstairs instead of standing on the escalator,
Right.
that's one way to do it.
Consider. So, was that it? On the side? Or-
Yeah.
Great.
Fail.
So I think we wanted to keep this somewhat open today to talk about, because people join this committee for a reason, and to hear about maybe some priorities or things that you're interested in or considered. And just really have a free-flowing discussion at this point rather than get too specific in terms of our work plan. But then maybe come back in another meeting to talk about the work plan specifically and with more deliverables and things like that. So if that sounds okay. And we could identify some of the areas where we might consider public art projects. And
Like physically,
yes,
yeah, okay.
public locations. So maybe, I don't know, where you might be the most aware of those locations.
I guess I'd be interested too to hear if you have heard things out in the community of other places, or if you've heard people talking about, oh, it'd be really great if there was a public art piece here, or that as well.
Well, we definitely need public art down at Cole Commons.
And so I do, as I say, I do have an informal proposal to bring forward to the committee. I was asked to bring it forward. I don't have anything written because it is very much in an informal stage, and she was aware that we were just going to be meeting for our first time. So should I jump into with that?
Sure.
Okay, so this is, so this would be a donated public art piece. It would be by an artist, a local artist, a large sculpture. So the artist is Guthrie Globe. Is everybody familiar with him?
I think
he
so.
did the
Mammoth?
Mastodon.
Mastodon,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah, exactly. And so he does quite large sculptures. So the individual, I'm trying to remember, she asked me to.
Do you want to have the board start a list?
Sure, great. So she would like to donate a piece to be erected and installed on the library lawn. She met with myself and Tina Nilsson, the head librarian, and my information back to her was it would come to a public art committee, and it would be, if you were to make the donation, it would be given to the municipality. So again, that would all kick in under the public art.
So it's like a commission by Guthrie? Is that, yeah?
Yes, it would be a commission, so she would pay for to the artist for the fee, and, possibly be open to some other costs as well. So, yeah, she just asked if we bring it forward. There were, in terms of the library, who I would think would be a stakeholder, as would be the Arts Council in the decision. I think, in my head, I was just trying to figure out how the process might work, so I would say that, I'm bringing it on, I'm bringing it up to, initially, she would be more formal in a proposal if that's what we decided as the process. And so she would bring it to the public art committee. We would determine whether or not we think it is a viable and a legitimate proposal. And then it would be a process, I think, that we would look into in terms of looking at long-term, I'll ask on all these questions about, the cost of it, what the cost of maintenance would be, what about installation, looking at insurance, all of those many, many things that we would have to consider. And then it would eventually, if we would make a decision, a recommendation, and if our recommendation was to go ahead, then I believe that would go to council. Council would need to approve that. So I think that might be the process, and this is all new, so just trying to use it as an example for me to go forward. And so I guess when we spoke to her initially, the things that, and I was going to say about the library and the Arts Council, these stakeholders, because they both lease or are using that space, so would be invited to comment as well. But I would think it would be the Public Art Committee that would make the recommendation to council. At any rate, the comments of the library were concerned about vandalism, and so that was the biggest concern, was vandalism, also just to make sure it was completely secure, so there was no liability issues.
Yeah, that'll be a good one.
Right, so those are things that would have to be considered, obviously.
And where exactly are you talking? Are you talking about like the grass area?
Yeah,
The side of the library?
So she wasn't very completely specific, although by the tree somewhere, the actual art piece that she was thinking of was a stag or a deer, one of the large deer. Again, it would have to be the way secured enough, the way it was installed to ensure that you can't climb on it, or antlers or can pierce anyone, or looking at that aesthetically, that's a whole other thing. But obviously, those things would have to be addressed. So those were just their concerns from the library, from the Arts Council, and I can just speak. We were like, we'd love to have something on there. That's our endorsement. So now I'm going to throw it back to this committee to say, is this something we want to pursue, and how would we do that? Would we invite her to do a formal?
I think I would recommend maybe before putting out the ask for, definitely we would want a more formal proposal from her, but I think as a committee, we should probably, it may be a little premature to run with the decision about whether we're gonna take it or not before we actually sit down and figure out the terms of reference for donations, or the parameters under which we might want to entertain those. It can get a little sticky. There's always issues. Safety is a big one, and liability is really huge. I know it's like kind of top priority for the city of Vancouver in terms of what we have found from experience is that if something can go wrong, it will eventually. So it takes a lot of forethought to kind of like think through things. So it would be best if we as a committee worked out a good term, like a frame of reference for the public art in general, but also like in terms of how we would want to see that process play out. Just so that if we have guiding principles around that, then that's going to that's going to force us to ask the questions that we need to be asking, and not do it retroactively when we went, oops, you know, how did that happen? You know, so yeah, it sounds like a great idea, but yeah.
What you've described is really consistent with the policy, the 3.4, where we shall be evaluating each proposal using established criteria that consider X, Y, and Z. So this is a great opportunity, a great test case to develop this.
Yes.
And it'll probably won't be the process that we use with subsequent donations, but working hand in hand with a willing donor, with a great piece of art where everybody is interested in making something work. I think we've got a good opportunity for policy development here as well. Yeah.
Yep.
Great.
And I'll try and peel some stuff off of our paperwork at Vancouver and see if there's anything that I can draw from to sort of apply here that we might find useful.
Great.
That is an action item for you.
Yes, it is.
Get it clear. Or not.
But I would really like if you could get back to the proposed donor, and just kind of say that we need to develop this stuff first, because I don't want her to think we're not interested.
And I did already say our first meeting, and there's no policies in place yet, or there is a basic policy, but definitely. So that's what I would return back to say. We're interested, but it's still a little early for us. Can you give us some time to get up to speed?
Yeah, it will be a time, yeah, it will take a bit of time. So definitely, I think all of us would agree, the interest is there, no doubt about it, but yeah, these things, it will take quite a bit of time.
I think just also in terms of process, with this committee recommending something to council, like something like that would also need to be recommended to other municipal committees, such as in that case, if there was something on the library lawn, for example, Parks and Environment, because they mow the lawn, like there would need to be things that were considered there. Public Works probably would need some consideration. Snug Cove Improvement, like just to kind of, no, they wouldn't?
We're not operational this year.
Okay.
There are a couple
So
other
again,
committees.
in terms of the process, it would be, we would refer that
We
project
would,
to
I think,
those
refer the project, once the
before-
project was, once we had a good handle of what that project was and exactly what it was gonna potentially look like, I think it would need to go to the other departments who would be potentially affected by something large like that on the library lawn.
Yeah, there could be, there's things that we won't know about, whether it's,
Exactly, like
un-
maybe there's a
underground
septic
piping,
field
yeah.
under there or
So they,
something.
we would refer that to them for
We
their.
would refer
feedback
that to
or
them,
input on
and
it.
yeah, and then I know like with the rec commission, when we get things referred to us, they will send a recommendation approving it or agreeing with it to council as well, and that actually helps to, then council has a bit more to go on too. I
So
suppose.
procedurally, what we would do is committees, we would refer to council and recommend that it go through to this, that, and the other committee.
Right, because we can't.
You can't refer directly to another committee.
Right, get it.
It would be, I mean, that level of detail, I think, would be appreciated by council, to say that council directs staff to consider, and then naming the departments. I think everyone would appreciate
So
that.
we would ask council
Ask
to
council.
refer it to
Yes.
their,
Yeah.
correct, got it.
Good.
Yeah, so that would be
Because
part of the
that
process.
process,
Yeah, and when we develop the process of accepting art, that should be laid out within that policy or
Mhm.
whichever we.
And there's also, I think, there's a discussion that we're gonna need to have around permanent, semi-permanent, or temporary public art, because all of them are viable and interesting in their own right, but a situation like this proposal, for instance, which I think we would be deeming more of a permanent structure, that always brings in a lot more trades than you might otherwise think. Like, then you're looking into slab supports and maybe metal armatures that need to be actually produced by perhaps, I'm just, as an example, like a licensed welder before the liability issues and stuff like that. So it gets serious quickly in terms of we need to be covering our butts
Cost,
and costs. So that's something for the person wanting to donate the artwork. So yes, it seems like she's probably aware that, she wants to pay the artist, but then we would be looking at just simple engineering costs and infrastructure costs to make it possible so that work is actually super solid and isn't falling apart and that sort of thing. So that's a whole other part in order to, it's probably a hidden thing that people don't necessarily think about right off the bat.
And it makes me wonder too, and maybe we're going too far down this road at this point, but if, say we were going ahead, but that there are all these different components that they went for the installation and other things considered, who would be would there be a project coordinator for all of that? Like, who would actually make it all happen? So, there'd be an agreement with the municipality between the donor but I'm just
probably-
who would coordinate it all?
You probably want to hire a general contractor for perhaps project to project, whether it's a different person. The thing with public art is every single situation is different.
Yeah.
And so you're involving different people all the time. So that can be in itself a challenge in terms of consistency and knowing the right people to talk to at the right time. But yeah, that's another thing. You need to have, we could, the municipality could subcontract the artist. So they also have to have $5 million liability and general liability and insurance, not just for the installation period, but also for a period of time after the artwork is put in, so that if somebody got hurt, who's on, right? Yeah.
I think that's part of the policy that would need to be developed as well, because it is becoming an asset of the municipality.
That's right.
Which
You gotta
the
treat it.
municipality would be covering liability at that point. But we do have the collaborative project service agreements where this might come into play. So at the bike park, for example, there was a group of, the bike park group was a group of community members who wanted to build the bike park, and they worked closely with myself with recreation and the manager of parks. So we were the municipal liaisons, project leads for that project, but the bike park group really took on the finding of the contractor who built the actual park, and so that person did become, the municipality was we ran through with the money, we had the funds, but this collaborative project service agreement allowed for those people to be in contact with the contractor, whereas staff didn't have as much to do directly with the actual hands-on on the ground making it happen. So that might be something where if it's the artist or somebody who's commissioning it, the general contractor, and there's
there is already a process in place for the municipality to work with somebody
great.
else to
Okay.
pull that project together. This was a group of volunteers, so that wasn't costing the project anything, right?
That's great.
Mhm.
Good strategies.
Do you know what the time frame is for the landscaping work?
Well, actually, I have to find out from the municipality, because we're trying to figure out where the timeline is for the work that's being done on Cardinia Road, so it's kind of, we're trying to ensure that it parallels that.
The sidewalk work?
Yeah, the extension and the widening of that, so we're trying to do something this summer. We're trying to, so we still have to come to council to get a permission, so
Right.
over the next month and a half, so.
I think we have some, let me just, it'll take me a few minutes, but I think we have some information on
Oh,
the
great,
timing.
because Gavin was gonna check with me, but I haven't heard back. So that's great, so we have, right now, as you see, we have some bunch of policy development process to work on. I already mentioned, I'll mention one more time, a public art inventory that we need to start working on. Again, let's go around and talk about something that the community that you want to bring forward. I just want to say one of the location is the rock-based wall, right? It's getting a lot
A
of
lock wall?
lock
Yeah.
wall.
Diana
Oh, yeah.
Diana Zdebski contacted me with a proposal for that as
Okay,
well.
can you tell me more about that?
So she, I'll just read what she wrote.
Or you're just gonna go ahead and throw that shopping wall into there?
Okay, so this is what she wrote.
This is from Diana?
Yeah, she said, the idea is to have a collection of large, 3 to 4 feet, salmon and pelagic marine mammals, quote unquote, swimming along the wall. These will be constructed from wood cutouts and each painted or designed by a different artist. You could have some art and metal, for example, and others that are wood. The school kids could do some as well. Because the fish would be quite large, they can be spaced out, creating a very open and less distracting feel. I would recommend painting that wall first a darker neutral color, totally agree with that, since it will be seen behind the fish. Some larger sea mammals could be included, like seals, orcas, humpback. Maybe in a spot where there's more space, one shape could become a green living wall. Affixing the cutouts to the blocks and having them as flush as possible will be the biggest challenge. My initial thought is to use L brackets and wedge them in between the cracks in the cinder blocks. The fish would need to be the right size to line up with the cracks. Also, weatherproofing the artwork would be the other question I would look into, since it's on wood. We need a pretty heavy-duty varnish. Yeah.
Okay.
So that was her proposal. The wood thing is a concern of mine, I think. Maintaining
And
it.
what happened to the last?
Yep,
So
exactly.
in that case,
Yeah.
it sounds like
So-
that would be something that we would create. The committee would create a competition around or whatever, I don't know.
I'm not
Competition,
sure.
but we would take on the project. It's not something she would like to
I
do. She's just.
doubt it. I think it's just a proposal, but maybe she would like to do that. I don't know. Is that, something we would address, like having a community member, if they have a proposal, let them take it on with one of us overseeing, or how would that work?
I just go back to the policy, I think, and to me it would be, well, I don't know for sure, but sounds like it's more of a project that it could be a community art project, yeah.
And it could be done under collaborative projects as well, because it's using municipal infrastructure for the wall.
And if you're incorporating a number of community members, right, if she's suggesting working with
Yeah.
school children or inviting other artists, I mean, that's.
May I ask who this is? I don't
Oh,
know.
Diana Zdebski, Art by Dye. She does the large paintings that are sort of graphic. She was part of the exhibit with Guthrie down at the gallery, that
Oh, okay.
collaborative exhibit.
She also did the salmon crosswalk
Oh, did she?
design. Yeah.
I think it's a fabulous idea, but boy, I have some serious concerns about the ones that were up before.
Right.
Which was part
The-
of the
yeah.
Olympic thing, were vandalized because somebody went
Yeah,
along.
they did.
And
Size.
weatherproofing just didn't work that well, and then the
That's from
cost
style.
of
Oh,
actually
gotcha, yeah, yeah.
fixing them to the lockbox
Remember what?
block is
Yeah.
going to be exorbitant, because you can't just
Yeah,
jam it in.
yeah.
There would be concerns from Public Works about the stability of the wall once you start sticking stuff in.
That's true, yeah.
So we've gone around the block a couple of times on wall
Literally?
ideas. Yeah.
And
I think
has anything stuck? Is there stuff? Yeah.
Just the straightforward painting on the wall. And you and I, and someone else, I can't remember who, we met with someone from the city of Vancouver who worked on the temporary mural projects that are done throughout the city. And we have notes from a couple of years ago about the process that he used, and he also sent forward some contact information from a woman that I remember the group that actually coordinates all of that. But the city was involved, and there was a coordinating group that helped generate those murals over.
It was a festival, mural festival, right?
Mural
I think
fest,
so,
yeah.
it's an annual mural
Yeah,
festival.
so we have all of the documentation on that the artists sign off on
Yeah.
and so forth. Where things came to a bit of a halt with the lockbox had to do with other work that was being done in the code. There was a sense on the part of one member of council that things might get kind of cluttered down there. There's going to be a new ferry building going in across the road in 2021, which is not that far off. So again, there were some concerns. It didn't get the momentum that it needed. We spoke with the school, with Sarah Haxby, and she was interested in coordinating sort of a community mural with the kids involved, but with sort of a higher level of coordination than there was the last time the kids were involved. So getting an artist who would work with the children and coordinate a good quality.
How long do those, I mean, in this kind of climate, like how long do murals last, and what's involved in like?
You can use boat paint, right? And it lasts for quite a while as long as it's maintained. And with the mural that was done with Josh Van Dyke's work, it was not maintained. So that was an issue because it was supposed to be varnished every year, and it didn't. And so that was part of it. So the weather just destroyed it. But, you know, somebody coming along with a knife or something, I mean, there's not much you can do about that. Another suggestion for that, and I love Dia's suggestion, and when we went to do the mural with Josh, we had 1,000,002 questions about how to mount it and how to, to maintain it, et cetera. So it was a learning experience for everybody, and but you can address a lot of things, right? I mean, it's a matter of trying to make it work and see if you can figure it out. So without suggesting we should drop it, but another idea came up through the Community Economic Development Committee. They're doing an initiative around articulating the Bowen brand, which is a promise of better for being here. And they're going to be doing a little bit of a collaboration with them, inviting photography, just shots of people's experience of Bowen, why they love Bowen in an image. And this will just be for a temporary exhibit. They're just going to be submitting 5x7s, but he thought that would be great if we could then put them on the walls. But that's
And Ron would always come up with ideas
and Ron
as well.
Yes, I am.
There's been interest in having some of his reworked photographs.
Oh, that was in Tuscany.
Residents.
Yeah.
To do those
the
large.
historic images, I think, right?
Both,
Oh,
the
okay.
historic images and the residence images. So that his notion had to do with sort of having, and I hope I'm describing this accurately, having essentially treating that wall as a gallery, because you have no idea how big that wall is.
It's huge.
It's really huge, and for somebody to be doing a large scale installation on that wall, it's a massive commitment of time and energy and so forth. So the gallery notion
So
was
each
kind of
block is like a frame picture.
no,
Oh.
bigger than that.
Yeah,
Like,
bigger.
because otherwise it's bits and pieces if you do it that way. So like big images, but multiple big images that could potentially be changed, which might address some of the concerns about preserving art.
Yeah, no, sorry, I was gonna say, I'm just realizing that one of the things that we have to be careful of is that, everybody's sort of, once it's known that you're on the public art committee, I think all these people are,
Yeah.
you're gonna get, yeah. And so that's another thing about our policy is how do we set up a system under which we might want to entertain proposals? Because if people are coming to all of us individually at different times and this and that, and we're going to get really distracted and we're not going to maintain any kind of focus. And also, inevitably, you're going to make a bunch of people really angry because it's going to look like only the people that we're talking to are getting stuff. So in all of these situations, I think we really need some kind of formalized process where there's possibly also some distancing from the committee, where we might ask a jury to form, to sit, to entertain. So firstly, to put out a call or some sort of thing, or make the community aware that, there's something afoot, and then put a jury together to entertain some suggestions or ideas. Otherwise, yeah, it's going to be, it will get crazy very quickly, because there's a lot of excitement around this stuff, and everybody's got some great ideas for sure.
Yeah, good, really good point.
That's what we did with the crosswalks, and that's what we did with some of the innovation grants, and it was always a bit arm's length from it.
I think the crosswalks was a great, that played out really, really well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think everybody loved it.
Other than the asset management aspect.
Okay.
But it was, inevitable. So again, I think if the block wall gets a lot of discussion out there, and
Sure
I think
does.
if we decide it's a priority, that something should be on there, we could determine how to invite the public to, or to invite artists or whomever to propose to do something, right? That would control it that way.
I think, an annual, I'm thinking that because of the public, it's so public, and everyone who's coming on and off
In your
Rowan,
face,
it's
yeah.
right in your face.
Yeah.
That, something a little more temporary, like a year long, anything going cyclical, like a year long might be a better idea for that location. So you're not stuck. So the problem with longevity is not an issue, because it's a year, it's out,
Yeah.
right? And then we can those are great parameters to talk about materials. Then you can think about, maybe vinyl applied to signboard and just screwed on, which is like removable, cheaper, and we're not worried about it deteriorating to a point of being a liability, because it's going to be pulled off, and it gives us an opportunity to open up that area for a lot of different people to be involved with, so we're not putting people's noses out of joint right out of the gate.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
Oh, that's gonna happen anyway.
It will, yeah, we know, yeah.
But if you do limit the time, and these people will have the attitude, well, I only have to put up with it for a year or two, and
Right,
so
yeah.
that they could probably live with it, whereas,
Yeah.
otherwise you put something up there.
Yeah.
Well,
That's
just,
great.
just think about the totem when it got put
Right,
in front of the library.
Right.
That's not
God.
That is not.
Before my time, so I'm
Well,
not
which is
going to ask
why,
any
one
questions.
of the reasons that we thought, okay, we really need this public art policy now. The way that was handled, but, so we've got quite a bit on plate already. Anyone else want to jump in with thoughts or ideas?
The Shauna Creek Wall, which is adjacent to the double lane parking,
Across from the school.
Oh,
across
yeah.
from the school, which is hideous, and I don't know what can be done with that.
Aren't they still putting that
That's what I
spray
always thought was happening.
spray green grass stuff on there? No. Oh.
It hasn't stuck.
Oh.
But perhaps the same kind of thing,
As
like
the-
a temporary, a year.
That's a
Then it
more
could be-
difficult surface though.
Oh
because
yeah.
it's-
You can't attach anything to it, otherwise the water gets in and it falls apart and you're doomed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, sure, we can talk about locations, but I think until we actually get something concrete to work from,
As in policies? you mean?
Yeah.
No?
I wouldn't go near that myself.
I think with policies, I think we need to talk about also dealing with the private landowners. And how do we do that? My thoughts is Stacy Beamer's corner. Like that corner is just like, it's a private
Oh,
corner.
it's
But
yeah, it is the
but
place,
it's
right?
right,
Yeah, yeah.
but it's privately owned. And how can we approach the Vandalis and say, we want to work with you and make it pretty and make it like, you know, just an example of how to work with private.
The last part of the introduction, this policy does not apply to art on private lands.
I think I would suggest that's beyond our mandate, but
I don't think we have a right to tell people.
well, we don't, but I mean, case in point, I mean, it's right there, very visual. It would, I think
That's
it
so
would
much
take, it
potential.
would be them coming to us to talk about it, probably. I mean, we could,
Some
But-
suggestions.
yeah, our
So-
mandate, I don't know if we can initiate those conversations, is all I'm saying.
There may be other conversations going on that might address that.
One of the issues about that I can speak to directly with the experience we're having right now with a particular work in Vancouver that is on private property, but they are refusing to maintain it and it's becoming a liability for the public. And so we're at this,
Okay, interesting.
yeah, it gets really complicated fast. We're at a loggerhead because they won't allow, we can't go on the property. The city can't go on because we would need a legal right of way to that little chunk of area where the artwork sits. And they refuse to allow us an opportunity to have that legal right of way because I think the perception is that the city it looks like they want to take land away, but that's not actually the case. It's a legal liability issue, strictly. That's the only reason the city would need that easement. So public art on private land is very tricky. It's doable, but I think if the landowner was coming to us to offer it up, there may be ways where Muni Legal could, draft something that is amenable to everybody. But for us to be reaching out is a lot more problematic, I think. Yeah, and I don't know. Do we have a legal team that might? You have a lawyer, right? Yeah, it might be interesting to see what their thoughts are about that.
And the other thing I just want to bring up is banner project. Would love to do a community banner project at some point.
Meaning,
The way, just briefly, the way I would see it would be an open competition for artists to apply for their images to be printed on banners. And we erect banners up and down there in the Cove and over at Artisan Square.
So would this be similar to what was done to generate the current banners?
Yes. The Arts Council did do a banner project and, what did I say?
So nothing?
Yeah, just cross it off your list.
And it was, what we did was we opened it up and then we chose, a jury chose 3 or 4 or something, or 5 maybe, and then the community could actually, as members of the Arts Council chose the ones that were chosen. At any rate, that's kind of, more of a, I don't know, tie that in with tourism maybe, and just in terms of, visually improving the community, but
What did the last project cost?
so the cost is for fabrication of poles. That's the biggest cost. The banners themselves are not expensive. They're $200 per banner. So, but the fabrication of poles or how you're going to erect them is a big question. And Hydro has a policy that you cannot put them on their poles. So then we have to figure that out. So that's
Right.
the challenge.
And all the poles
That's
right
the
down,
challenge.
going on the truck, that's hydro?
Oh, it is. Oh, Hydro. Yes.
Okay, so the municipality
you have to
has
know
no
the-
poles there for any reason? No.
No.
Okay, interesting.
So you'd be looking at attaching to businesses, is that correct? What would you-
That is an option. We actually did explore that once, and private businesses were okay with, they were open to that. So, but
There's a great opportunity for
yeah.
sponsorship
There
there too.
is
right?
a sponsorship, and then there
absolutely.
is a partnership. Yeah.
Yeah,
So that's something that, but that's a whole project in itself as well. So again, I'm not sure where we would take that on as a project, or again, if that's something that somebody else brings in. But, I mean, part of our mandate definitely is to increase the public art inventory. So that is a mandate of this, as far as I read it, committee. So we could be taking action, being direct in terms of creating that public art. But again, we have to be careful of what our priorities are and how much work we're taking on, and also
And then I have one other thought, is working with West Vancouver Parks and Crickman Park. And, you know, is that something that has been thought of? Like, if we work with them on, like, creating a sculpture garden in Crickman Park?
So
Or
Metroman,
Sorry, Metroman.
I defer to Maureen.
And then the heritage, the orchard, you know, what's happening there. Maybe involved with public art for them.
What do you think?
The collaboration, I serve as the Metro Vancouver Arts Committee person for Bowen. So Parks is always happy to entertain proposals to do this and that. They sometimes don't move as quickly as one might like. With the Davies Orchard, there is currently a detailed design process that's underway for the rehabilitation of that site. They are looking at the introduction of interpretive signs. They'll probably focus on the natural history of the area rather than the cultural history. The Parks Committee, the Metro Parks Committee, has not seen the detailed design and probably won't until the end of the fall. They are very they feel as though they have done the initial community consultation that they need to and have feedback. So they're not looking for further feedback at this point. And one of the things that Council will be talking about next Monday is how we can encourage Metro Parks to ensure that as they move forward, that the community is involved in some aspect of the design. So it's a complicated situation in some respects, and it'll be much clearer by the end of the year. And I think there's plenty of opportunity to do really cool things down there. And the notion of doing a sculpture garden in the park was actually something that was brought up by the prior head of policy and planning for Metro Parks.
Great.
So they're not averse. They have all sorts of art in other parks and on district infrastructure. So they just need to get to the point where they can open the gate for that to come through, and they're not there yet.
Okay.
Gonna happen.
Cool.
Okay. All right, any other just general comments about some of the work we might want to undertake or propose or initiate? All right, so just to kind of bring it back in terms of our role as a committee, just I went back to the mandate and duties. So I think to start, first we definitely need to work on policy development and process. Another aspect to communications part of it. So whether or not we wanted to create an art walk, public art walk, and the Arts Council did do some work on that a few years ago. So there is kind of a sketch of one. And this public art inventory is number C under the mandate. So, in terms of how we want to proceed to develop a work plan, which would be based, I guess, on 12 months. Is that what it's usually annual work plan?
Yeah, maybe it would fit better if we could do until the end of the year, and then maybe you want to do a 1.5 year one, but the committees usually submit their work plans at the beginning.
I
So
wonder
this is
if
a
calendar
calendar
year.
Yeah,
I wonder if we should keep it to a calendar year to align with the budget.
yeah.
I think so. And it might very well take us until October, November to actually have a lucid work plan. So
Right.
Oh, yeah.
committees
Absolutely.
muddle along for a while before they pull that together. So
And we will need to pull together a proposal for a budget and that's due when, in September, October of the year? Or when
Yeah,
we would
for
submit
the
that?
following year,
For the
yes.
following year?
Oh,
Well, it's getting earlier, I think,
Yeah.
I
I
would
think
think
September.
September.
Just to keep that, I mean, that'll come around very quickly.
Yeah.
So we have to be prepared by, let's say, the fall to have a public art budget proposal as well as priorities and
We'd have to figure that out first, and then we would know what sort of money situation we're dealing with.
Right.
Yeah.
yeah, so and this is already May.
Yeah.
So we're-
Summer.
Yeah, so, no time, no rest for the wicked.
so public art inventory, that's already existing.
It's a framework for it, it needs to be updated.
And what does it exist as? What is
It
it?
identifies, actually, both on private and public spaces, artwork that's out there.
Okay.
So
Is it just a document?
It's in
like
a database, yeah,
Okay.
it's an Excel sheet.
Excel
So I
sheet,
can
okay.
share that with the committee, I haven't taken a look at it for a while, but there's about 50 items on it. And as I
Okay.
say, that's old, and some of them might not even be existing anymore, so that's why it needs to be updated. So I think that's it's good to do some work on that. And again, the policies and.
That also would speak to another policy thing that we're gonna have to look at doing is identifying those items that we would actually agree that are under our purview as the Public Art Committee, because I know we're doing that with a lot of works that are maybe held like by corporations in their building lobbies.
Yeah.
They're actually all listed on the Vancouver Public Art Registry, but we're looking at taking them off because we have nothing to do with them.
Right.
And we don't even know if they exist anymore and all this thing. So that's something that we would want to like look at this registry and determine like what sort of things qualify as public art that would fall under our mandate or under our purview, and which would be like, oh, that won't have anything to do with us for various whatever reasons. It might be just to clarify that
Sure.
that role of what constitute public art.
So I'm guessing a
In
lot
our
of these
community.
pieces are not public, they're probably sent to this community school, or they're up at Artisan Square, so,
Right,
you know, they're,
right.
but I'm just curious, the one in the park, at the orchard, there's the sculptures, so is that owned by Metro?
No.
Those pieces?
No, I don't actually know who owns it,
Oh, so
but
that's
it's not
a
Metro.
good question, yeah, so there'll be some that we don't even know who
Right.
owns them, right?
The Heritage Commission may have done some research on
Oh,
that.
okay.
And just we have a draft registry for the Heritage Commission that I'm hoping will get worked through in the rest of this year. And the decision that was made there was, in order to get the registry established, that we select the items where there would be essentially, we expect a complete buy-in. So nothing private and nothing controversial, but just to get the toe in the door. So like the old general store, you create a heritage registry with the old general store on it. Everybody says, great. So just keeping it really small in the initial stages and then building it up.
And something on Crown Land that's not public then considered, like I'm thinking the Mastodon,
And
That's secret though,
but it's on Crown Land,
Yeah, it's Crown Land.
right? Yeah.
but it's not municipal land, right?
No, but it doesn't say municipal, it says public
Got
land.
it, it's public,
Yeah.
okay. So
But when we start looking at things like municipal liability, we need to be clear, I think, about what is on this list and what we're
Yeah.
maintaining and what
Ownership
we're
needs to be
liable.
very
Ownership
carefully
needs to
figured
be
out.
Very carefully.
Yeah, because once you start, like, if we look like we're claiming it,
This is gonna be the fun
We're on the
committee.
yeah, once we start claiming things like that, then you know, fingers can be pointed to say, hey, how come you're not taking care of it,
Yeah.
Yeah.
right? So we gotta be very careful.
Or my
Yeah.
kid fell off of that and broke his leg.
Right.
Yeah.
You're
Yeah.
responsible.
well, the totem sculpture, somebody somebody asked me who
Is that
was
Shane's one, the one that's up at?
It's James and Simon James worked on it as well.
Oh, okay, okay.
So anybody know who owns that? I'm pretty sure it's the Bellringers, but I'm not 100% certain. So something needs to be checked. It was the municipalities. It was given to the municipality, but they didn't want it. So, so I think Steve Bellringer accepted it, but we have to check that. I don't know. So at any rate, we're almost just ready to wrap up here. As far as for our next, in preparation for our next meeting, I guess we need to determine, not necessarily today, but if we're all going to be working on the policy together, or is it something that, Scott, if you could bring in some potential templates or anything that you...
Yeah, I'll see what I can dig up to
that
kind of help
discussion.
us, because it's not, like, I have a certain specialty within public art in Vancouver, but not so much necessarily this policy development,
Fair
but
enough, yeah.
at least I have maybe some access to stuff that we wouldn't otherwise. I'll see what I can dig up.
And there is stuff
Yeah.
out there. I know,
Yeah.
I mean, I within my file probably have, this is West Vancouver. Yeah, there's some policies.
You've got a
that we
bunch
do,
too, yeah.
right. But I don't know how we're gonna proceed to move that forward, but, that sounds like one thing we have to highlight, the inventory. I've written down communications as well, so if we wanna talk about developing a public art walk, or just even letting the community know what's going on, talk about that. And then identifying, just go back to the terms of reference, public art priorities, and eventually we'll need to be working on that budget as a start.
It's lots,
Sounds Right,
yeah.
it's a lot.
I have those for next meeting.
I think one thing too that might be kind of near the top of the priorities would be the formalizing a process of how we're getting ideas and suggestions of, because that could be coming quickly once people come and know.
Yeah,
this
yeah, it's a
is
good
there.
point.
Like just, we need to know our process, I think.
Okay, well.
So that's basically about formalizing our mandate of acquisition.
Yes.
Yes.
And that's something I think we should be establishing that like toot sweet.
Yeah.
So that
Yeah.
now that we've got a committee,
Yeah.
we need to have something to respond with, because people are going to be checking in about that. And so one of the things that we probably want to make very clear is that nothing's happening right away.
Yeah.
We have
Yeah,
lots
yeah,
of
yeah.
work to do to
Yeah.
establish, so everybody just like, hold up. Yeah.
Some space. Yeah, and then we have to consider capacity, so if we do decide that we're going to be able to initiate one project a year, or
Mhm.
2 projects or whatever, but, we really have to be specific and,
Capacity and budget.
yes.
Yeah.
And budget, of course,
Yeah, that might be a good idea. I mean, start small. If we could tackle one community-based project, like figuring out a yearly thing for Lock Block, and then one singular work acquisition, that would be a lot for a year. That would be amazing. It wouldn't happen right away.
No,
We have a
but-
lot of foundation work to do, but as a goal, that would be doable and not overwhelming.
Mhm.
Yeah, there's a lot of details with those things that would
Yeah,
get
like the sound
crazy
of that,
quick.
yeah.
Yeah.
Great.
Cool, that's great.
Okay. How do we feel? Did we also get some stuff done? Yeah.
Yeah.
That was a great start. Good. So we need to pick a date for our next meeting? I think, Justin said we'll have the new poll, or?
I guess I gotta go back to the show.
The fun part. Can we go back to the? And actually,
Would the next one be a Thursday evening then?
Right, yeah, and give Phil a chance to weigh in.
Yeah, okay, I'll send out a doodle.
Okay.
What's our email address?
PAAC, P-A-A-C,
yeah, I was just gonna say, I love these images, and we kind of talked about maybe even, I don't know, just for fun, for inspiration, to show images at meetings, to just throw some up there. Not,
So you guys wanna
not that you
s-
have to find them all the
You
time.
guys can send them.
But you guys, if you have any images to send or see some fun things,
I guess, can we put them on the website, or is that copyright or something?
Copyright problem,
Look at him, he's so cranky.
yeah.
I don't think he has
You did.
So we'll share them, I'm just want to make sure.
Unless you steal them from Wiki.
Oh,
It's Commons.
oh.
Yeah, you can take anything off of there.
No?
It's already been like copyright
Released?
it's released, yeah.
So just, I just popped in my head some art that public art in Quesnel. They got artists to paint the fire hydrants
Oh, yeah.
into an image of some historical person.
Gold rush.
Gold rush
Oh.
type thing. They
Hilarious.
are so cute.
Yeah, they're really good.
Yeah.
We have a new fire chief. We could
Did
roll that.
we get any fire chief?
We will have.
So that would be great community project.
There you
go.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah, they are really cute.
Yeah. You've seen them?
I went last summer.
Yeah.
Not just to see them, but.
No, no. And they actually
I thought I was gonna be on this
have
committee, so I
a brochure at the Tourist Bureau that lists them all and where they're located and who the artist is.
That's good, love it.
Yeah, that's fun.
Yeah, be easy to do.
There they
Oh,
are.
there they are. Oh my gosh.
Oh, that's fun.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And they were okay with that, eh? It doesn't,
That's
it
surprising.
wasn't,
Yeah, the water still comes out
It's
of it.
still fine though.
I know, but
right?
to
They
find
gotta-
that, I was worried about that, I
Yeah.
didn't know, yeah.
And then we also have those big blue boxes, or the electrical boxes that are all over.
The hydro boxes?
Is it, oh, is it
Hydro.
hydro? Oh darn, because they'd be fun to paint
Except
too.
in the city, you see them.
Oh.
Yeah,
they're
Hydro does it all the
painted.
time, Hydro reps, yeah.
They're painted in the city.
They
So,
do.
what if
they
we could
do.
do those?
And the
Because it's
mailboxes.
five-
No, these are just easy
Because it's $5,000-6,000 a box.
to paint them.
They
Well,
get
no,
wrapped.
but you know,
They get
something like fire hydrants, there's no cost. You tell the artist to do it. And then they get them removed.
We looked into, there've been inquiries over the last couple of years about painting those hydro boxes. And they have a beautification program
Okay.
that we might actually want to look into.
BC Hydro.
BC Hydro. And they subsidize, but the cost to the municipality was going to be in the neighborhood of $5,000. And
Per.
we didn't have that money.
Per box.
Wow.
It's because they do some sort of special wrap.
It's a vinyl wrap
around it.
and the heat shrinks on and they have to, and you're paying the artist
Yeah.
an amount to even get the image to use and all
Right,
the
that's
rest of it. but-
So
Yeah.
it's
That
doable
sounds
to put a
great.
big budget,
It doesn't.
but
Yeah.
So again, in grant combination, maybe a grant, and they subsidize a bit of it, and yeah.
And a donation.
I don't know, yeah, that sounds like to me,
down the road.
well, A down the road, but if it requires a bunch of effort to get funding and stuff like that, that we might be able to apply to a different project rather than just prettifying some hydro
Totally.
boxes. Like, we've got a lot of nature around us. It's not like the city where you're trying to
Yeah.
beautify in the same way.
Right, good point, yeah.
So I just sent you a little Excel sheet that shows you the extent of the lot. Bob went down and counted every one of them, and they're all represented, so you can get a sense of the scale.
Well,
Oh.
okay.
Yeah, I know when we were doing the mural, I couldn't believe it, because it's like, it just ended up being such a small part of it, and it was a big project.
But Diana's initial suggestion painted a more attractive color,
They're darker colors, yeah, for sure. Just,
Yeah, our first recommendation.
power washing,
It is
power
about
washing paint.
2:30, so we are all wrapped up. Call for a motion to adjourn. Shauna. All right.
Done.
Thank you,
All right.
everyone.
Thanks for
Awesome.
sharing, Jackie.
Yes, thank you, Jackie.
And thanks to you
Thank you
for
for
stepping up.
taking up. Yeah. Thank you very
me
much.
too.
Yeah,
Excited about it.
Yeah, totally.
Good, good.
Your link morning came as like an upgrade to my Outlook.
It didn't come through?
It came as.
Did you have the camera?
Camera.
Jackie, did you want to